can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Howard Chang of theturnlab.com and justboardrooms.com. And Howard, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, because Howard has a very successful agency that he ended up selling and then started another one that reinvented with the Turn Lab. I had Jason Swank on. That was a really good episode, actually 2 episodes. One, he talked about building his agency to 8 figures and selling it. And then what he's been doing is helping buy up agencies in his kind of reinvention. And he has an agency mastermind as well. That was a great one, just about the agency landscape, business valuations. Another good one was Adit Clevitt. Adit Clevitt is an interesting model, Howard, where she is an easy button for a company to create SOPs. That's her niche. So if someone wants to smooth out their hiring, their operations, their, any staff, onboarding, client onboarding, they call her and she helps with that. So we geeked out on our favorite productivity tools and much more on that one. So that was a good one. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. So how we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and run their business. Most importantly, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. And I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. And so if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com to learn more or email us at support@rise25.com. We're happy to answer any question you throw our way. I'm excited to introduce Howard Chang. He's founder and CEO of the Turn Lab. You can find him at theturnlab.com and CEO of Just Boardrooms.com as well. He has over 20 years as a successful CEO. He's founded and exited 3 startups. The Turn Lab, he's set out to reinvent agencies, which we'll talk about. And he had a successful agency, which I mentioned, for over 20 years before he sold it. And Just Boardrooms actually was incubated out of the Turn Lab. And it's an innovative marketplace. It's like an Airbnb, except for business space, which is really cool. And there's a lot of that inventory out there. So if you have a question, you can check it out. And if you have inventory for your space, you can go to justboardrooms.com. But his ventures span from retail to sports to film and more. And most impressively, he's a cancer survivor. So Howard, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Start off and tell us about the Turn Lab and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. The Turn Lab is our our experiment to reinvent the agency or marketing agency model. I ran a successful integrated agency for 25 years. We had 60 odd employees, and it was great. Except what I realized is that business leaders were looking for something else. They were looking for companies that were really interested in falling in love with their problem, not trying to sell them solutions or campaigns or media. And so the Turn Lab was an attempt to really build a consultancy-led marketing technology lab. Or company. And so we started with only 12 people, and it was definitely a learning experience, but we heavily invested in research capability. We have strategists and we have analysts on team. We have a fully built out technology team that's in-house, based in Toronto, not offshored, and we build enterprise digital solutions. So it's really about taking a business challenge and really putting all the resources behind it to produce the best outcomes possible. So a much more holistic approach than a traditional marketing agency. And we're 5 years in and we're still learning as we go.
Talk about the services. So when you first started the Turn Lab, obviously sometimes we start something And it always morphs into something else based on feedback. And it's one of the things actually you do with Turn Lab is you get feedback and you help people iterate and change for the better. What was the original idea behind the Turn Lab? And then how has it evolved with the feedback you got as you took on clients?
Well, I think the original concept was to try to bridge the gap between the growing role of consultancies for businesses that were very invested in helping solve business problems, but didn't really have a great understanding of a lot of the audience pieces that kind of go with the business problem, and bridge that with some of the great capabilities of many agencies and marketing companies that were fantastic at execution. They could build a great campaign, they could build a great brand, but how do we connect the business challenge with some of these executions was what we were trying to solve. So when we built it, we started small. We started hiring some strategists and analysts. We started subscribing to research platforms like Environics and others to try to give us that evidence-based approach. And then what we learned along the way was how important technology played in this. So we always had a bit of a technology practice in my old agency, but we really built out kind of an enterprise capability on this side because we understood that digital transformation is something most people didn't actually understand. So how do we actually build a strategy and execute? There's a contiguous line in terms of what a business offers and their entire customer experience. And so what we had to learn is we had to be strong in all the aspects. We couldn't just be good at research. We had to be really good at research. We had to really be good at planning. We had to be really good at branding and marketing and media and technology and digital commerce. So now we're 60 people. So we had to build out the team, and the business obviously was there to support it. Our experiment seems to be working. We've been approached by a couple of big network agencies to look at buying us, which we're not ready to do at this point because we're still building out this model. I think what we've heard from other industry leaders is we really want to do what you do, but we just don't quite have the nerve, the resources, and the will to really commit to what you're doing yet. So we're watching you. We're watching you to see whether this model works. And I think we are a bit of an experiment for the industry right now.
What is the main difference in between this agency and the first one you started? It seems to me that it's really a research first. And like when and you could correct me, but when you went to hire, maybe in your first agency, you were hiring more expertise on technical things. In this one, it seems like the main difference is you hired strategists, analysts, researchers in the tech to help with that, which would have been much different when you look back at your first agency.
As you know, Jeremy, marketing is this kind of art and science, right? And a lot of times we're just throwing stuff up against the wall to see if it sticks. And so a lot of marketing dollars are wasted. A lot of leaders know that. In fact, most agencies even know that. A lot of the stuff we do isn't measurable. It's hard to really, connect it to the bottom line. So what we really wanted to do was to create better evidence-based decisions around the whole brand building, marketing, and business building process. So the reason why we invested in researchers is because there are lots of strategists working in the advertising business, by the way. But I had a very interesting conversation recently with one of the largest database providers to the consultancy world. And they said of all their clients, only 6 are ad agencies. The rest are all consultancies. So ad agencies believe in strategy. What they don't really do is they don't really invest and believe in real research. So, for example, at the Turn Lab, we built and we host a 10,000 member consumer panel. That takes effort and money and resources to do that. But now we have this incredible resource that we can go to directly. We pay 6 figures annually in subscription fees to research platforms that our team can access. We have a commitment to make sure that every strategy we present and every execution we undertake is evidence-based. So that I think is the big difference. So in the past, of course, we were strategists. We know the business, we know culture, we know art, we know blah, blah, blah. But a lot of it was kind of seat of the pants experience stuff, as opposed to, no, we actually have some data to prove it. We've actually done the research. So that's the big gap. And then the connection to digital is really interesting because digital is so data-driven, right? So sure, you can build websites as an agency, but if you don't actually have an entire digital infrastructure within your organization where you have programmers that can not just build websites, but understand the importance of data and how that transacts around digital commerce, around social commerce, then you're kind of working half blind. And so we had to learn that stuff along the way. We had to make those investments along the way. And we're still learning, to be honest with you.
When we look back, and I know, again, when you started this, you already had a successful businesses. I'm wondering for the Turn Lab, the first client and then the first engagement and what that engagement was, because you have a hypothesis going in and you have to now, okay, it's a little bit different. We have to price it a certain way. What would that first engagement look like with the first client?
Yeah, so the first client we landed at the Turn Lab is a company called the Metro Toronto Convention Center. So they're one of the biggest convention centers in North America, and they attract.
That's a good first client to have.
It's not a bad first client, yeah, and they attract companies from like events from all around the world. So they host Comic-Con and huge companies. Events. So when they put out this RFP, we actually called them up and said, this is who we are, and we actually don't do RFPs. But what we can do is we can help you understand your problem better. So I offered them a 2-hour strategy hack, which is a 2-hour very fast-paced workshop that myself and some of our strategic leaders, which at the time was 2 other people, because we were only 12 when we started. And we actually went and did a workshop with them to really deeply understand what was the challenge that they were facing. And so by doing that, they got a chance at the sense of who we are, how we work, and how we approach these things. And they said, we've never had an agency approach us this way. We're gonna bring you on board as a finalist agency without even submitting an RFP. So we didn't submit an RFP officially. We kind of submitted just a letter of intent. We did this workshop, and then we actually ended up landing the business. And what I found very interesting in this is that clients are also stuck a little bit in what they know, right? So they were used to dealing with traditional agencies. So we kept shifting them towards research. We kept shifting them towards analysis. And finally, when we began doing the executions, I remember their head of marketing saying to us, you know what? It's taken us about 3 months of working with you, but I actually truly understand the value you bring now. I didn't quite get it before, but and we made a massive difference to their business. We helped them, navigate the whole COVID piece. We helped them navigate the post-COVID. We rebuilt their website into an enterprise model, which dramatically increased their business into their sales office. So this was again around our approach of, we're not here to sell you something. We're here to fall in love with your problem. And I think that approach is something that all consultants and agencies could really lean in and learn from, is that quite often we get caught up in shilling our solutions, right? Like, oh, I'll sell you some media, I'll build you a campaign, I'll rebrand you, without really actually falling in love with the client's problem. And by doing that, we end up getting insights that we may never have gotten before that can actually help the business.
With before the kind of when you became a finalist of that RFP, without doing an RFP, was there a monetary exchange in that initial conversation with doing any initial research before getting to that, or were they just kind of waiting for that final RFP stage to actually have that business relationship?
One thing that we won't do is we won't do spec work on requests. So if an RFP includes spec work, we definitely won't do it. But what we will do is prepare properly for a client meeting, like anybody should, and do our own research and go, hey, you think your problem is this. Our research is actually showing your problem might be this. That can often get a business leader going, okay, well, I'll take a 30-minute call for sure on that hypothesis, but often it leads to bigger conversations. So what we do is we invest in things like a strategy hack. It's not for everybody. In fact, on our website, you can actually apply for one of our strategy hacks, but you have to be qualified. It has to be a problem that we think is interesting to solve. You have to be a business that we are aligned with in terms of our values. So I think there's a little bit of that, but I think that initial investment of time and energy is incredibly valuable. I was talking to one of the people at the ICA, the Institute of Canadian Agencies, and he was saying that, the average pitch costs most agencies tens of thousands of dollars in time to build a pitch. Well, I think that time is much better invested into really actually better understanding your client's problem and maybe helping them reframe the problem differently. And I think that is what gets us in the door more often than not.
With the new model, how did you think about pricing compared to the last agency?
Yeah, so we do not bill by the hour. We do something called value pricing. We don't. We basically set a price for our services, and then the other thing that we do, which is 100% completely taken price negotiation off the table, is we do option pricing. So, for instance, if we got approached by, let's say, a company to do a website, a big enterprise website, we'll decide what we believe that website is worth based on our experience, and then we'll also offer them options. So here's your minimum viable product. This is what you essentially ask for in your request. Here's what we believe you actually need, and then here's what some of your competitors are actually doing. All this added value, and we basically give them three options. And every single time, the procurement person, the lead on that project will go, which one should I pick? As opposed to, can you sharpen your pencil on this price? No, small, medium, large. And I would say 80% of them pick medium. They usually pick our recommendation of what they think we should do. So I think the combination of value pricing and option pricing has completely changed the conversation on pricing for us. It may not be for everyone. We don't even disclose hourly rates anymore. We don't disclose time we've spent. If it takes us 10 hours or 100 hours, that's irrelevant to the client. Here's a price. If this outcome's worth it to you, then pay the price. And if not, that's okay. There's lots of other people you can work with.
And is the engagement typically broken into that, okay, let's pay for that initial strategy, and then once you present all of the research and the strategy, then they can make a choice at that point?
For sure. I mean, we do have these what we call staged engagements. So we definitely will start a project sometimes just doing the research and strategy, which then often leads to execution. I would say 80% of the time it leads to execution. We do have some just pure strategy and research projects that we've done for organizations that's all they wanted. But we're also happy to take it right through to the finish line as well.
Talk about the niche. What niche from the previous agency did you have? And then how did you decide on the categories in this one?
Well, I think because we're a value-based company, number one, we want to work with people that are aligned in values. I had an experience in my previous agency where we worked with a pharma company for a number of years, and it was a fairly innocuous pharma. It wasn't like, selling Oxycontin or anything like that, but it was really around a lot of cosmetic pharma. And started off very innocuously. They asked us to build them an e-commerce site. They asked them to build us a CRM site. But over time, we started seeing some kind of what I would call ethical transgressions. They were starting to make claims that I didn't think was really backed on science. And so I actually made the decision to resign from the business, which was a big challenge because obviously you're giving up a lot of revenue when you make those decisions. But that lesson really helped me navigate forward into some of my existing clients where we're really trying to work with companies that share similar values, that want to do some good work. And most importantly, I want to work with people we want to hang out with. So the personal relationships are really important too. So I think I would say the way we vet our clients is quite personal because I think all business is personal in a way, right?
What mistakes do you feel that you made in the first agency that you bring to this one that you realize, okay, I'm not going to do that again?
Well, we used to go after a lot of awards, and we actually won a lot of awards. And I remember getting rid of all the awards when I wound down that agency. And it was like literally a truckload of awards. Like it was terrible. I felt as an environmentalist, I'm like, that's a lot of plastic and hardware I have to throw away here. And I got rid of them. And we have kind of a no award policy at the Turn Lab because the way we look at it is we're here to build great outcomes. We're not here to self-aggrandize our agency with awards, because the challenge with a lot of awards, and I'm not opposed to agencies going after awards. I think it's probably very fun to go to Cannes and win some great stuff, and it's a great way to attract talent. Lots of benefits to awards, but what we found is that awards were distracting. Our creative teams were focused too much on winning awards and not enough on actually solving the problem. So with the Turn Lab, and we have a great creative team, we have 15 amazing creatives, but they're all very business minded. They're all solutions focused. Like, is this creative solving the problem? That's the question they're always asking themselves, as opposed to, is this creative going to get me to Cannes? Because sometimes that great creative that gets you to Cannes, no one quite actually remembers what it did, or did it actually help drive the business forward?
Love that. So there's a no awards policy. What other policies like that come from the previous agency that you're not going to do again?
No YOLO, right? Like no, throwing stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. I think as naturally creative beings, I think humans, we like to take risk, and I think risk is often worthwhile to take. But I would say, look before you leap, right? So yeah, you can go jump off that 40-foot cliff, but check the rocks below, make sure they're okay, make sure you know how far you got to jump out to clear the rocks, all that kind of stuff. So I do think really moving away from that, my gut tells me to, hey, let's do a gut check. Your gut might tell you this. Let's do a gut check. So we really moved away from that, by the seat of your pants kind of approach. I think a lot of creative shops lean in on, sometimes very successfully, but then sometimes there's a big miss because that seat of the pants. One of the things that I really learned early on was, we often think we're the customer when we're usually not the customer, right? So, oh, well, I would like that, but why would you like that? I'll hear a client who's like the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. So, well, I wouldn't buy that. I said, well, are you the customer? Because I think you're selling widgets to like the average middle-class person. You're not the average middle-class person. And I see the same thing happen with agency executives as well, where they often think they're the customer. Well, I don't like that color, or I wouldn't do that. Well, do you actually know who the audience is? And so I think those pieces, are really important for us as leaders to understand. The audience intelligence piece, I can't understate the importance of that, because we've stubbed our toes so much in the past on that, and we've learned so much to value and appreciate it. And that's really helped us build a lot better outcomes for our clients.
You talk about, Howard, an example of this in the golf space.
Yes.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, we had a client years ago, a man I respect very much to this day. We remain great friends. He launched the biggest golf retailer in Canada called Golf Town, and eventually ended up buying Golfsmith in the States as well. Like, this was a very, very accomplished CEO. And I remember early on in our relationship with him, and we did work with him for 10 years and helped build it into a $400 million retailer. So we had a great relationship. But in the beginning, we used to have these incredible arguments where he would go, I would never buy that, and I would never buy this. And I said, don't you fly around in a private jet? Like, are you really your average customer? So he goes, well, yeah, golfers are rich people who drive Escalades. And I said, well, let us do some research for you. And we actually found out that 85% of his customers were public course golfers. And a lot of them were what I would call Joe Sixpack. Like, they worked in the trades. They had a little bit of time on their hands because they knocked off the trades early, and they went and did 18 holes at the end of the day. And they were coming in and buying lots of golf equipment from this guy. So when he put like $700 drivers in his ads, which we thought, don't do that, don't lead with the $700 driver. He really pushed us. But when we showed them the data that proved that his average customer wasn't him, it was a big eye-opening moment for him. And I think that they really changed their business. They went from a niche retailer into a international powerhouse throughout North America.
How did the ads change? So obviously you take those expensive drivers out. What did you find did work?
Well, we did some simple experiments. And this is the interesting thing, is that we started going from like lowest to highest pricing in our ads, both digital and back in those days, in the 2000s, we did some print ads as well. So digital and print ads, website, we started arranging things around, let's put a bit more value. We also understood that golf was a very intimidating sport. So a lot of people entering golf, like, I don't know what to do. What do I dress? What do I wear? Oh my God, my boss invited me to golf. What do I do? So we started doing a lot of content on the website around, golf 101, golfing with your boss 101, right? Like don't step on the putting line and just little etiquette things. And we actually created a channel called GTTV, Golf Town Television. And this channel became the biggest golf channel online in Canada, bigger than the PGA in Canada. So what we did is we really understood that if we really want to connect with the audience, we need to fall in love with their problem, which was golf is complicated, golf is expensive, golf is intimidating. We really increased their participation in women in golf and women coming to the store. We helped them build out a really big and impressive soft goods business by really positioning golf clothing as golf fashion and really changing the conversation. And again, that is through audience intelligence. We did the research, we talked to customers and transformed their business. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we love doing. We love solving problems and we love making shit happen.
Talk about starting the Turn Lab, right? You come off a successful company. Do you go out and look for a client first? Are you hiring first? What's the order of things when you're starting up this company?
Well, I mean, when you're starting, you're just trying to keep the lights on. So, you're sometimes taking on business that isn't quite 100% there, but you do it because you got to keep the lights on. But I would say in the beginning, we thought very carefully about the kind of people and companies we wanted to work with. So that was an important piece. We really worked on our own brand strategy, to be quite frank. We spent a lot of time crafting our positioning, crafting our values, crafting our purpose, because we wanted to make sure that we had some kind of blueprint to check these decisions against. And we do this for other companies because it's really important. I remember reading the Ben & Jerry's brand position years ago that another agency had done. And I really loved it because I think their brand promise was, outrageous ice cream with a conscience. And I thought, yeah, that's a great promise, because if I was a product developer at Ben & Jerry's, I probably wouldn't approach the executive team with a flavor like French vanilla because it doesn't align with the brand promise. So often, brand strategy really supports and propels business strategy. So we did a lot of that work ourselves, and that really helped us get better at making good decisions. It also helped us get better at recruiting. So, one of the things we found is no matter how talented somebody is, if they're not aligned, they're probably unproductive for your company. I would rather have someone who's a middling performer, but highly aligned, and get more of those people in, because then they're willing to collaborate. Then they're willing to row in the same direction. And I do think that kind of teamwork is much better than having a couple of rock stars who often have their own agenda. So I think, really understanding corporate culture and the impact on culture on performance and outcomes and innovation is a really important piece for any business leader. But for startup, for us, it was mission critical because we couldn't afford 55, 60 staff that we have now. We started with like 12. So every person we hired had to be really productive for our objectives.
I would say even for some people, starting with 12 is large. Do you self-fund that? Do you have other co-founders or investors?
Well, like I said, my first business was successful, and I've been an entrepreneur for a lot of years. So I was able to self-fund it, right? So I didn't have to go to bank financing. I had to fund it personally, my own money, which is a risk. When you're putting 7 figures of your own money to start a company, you're kind of thinking, wouldn't that be a nice vacation home down? But you as an entrepreneur, you take these risks. It's a calculated bet. So I would say that. Like even with Just Boardrooms, I find it an interesting conversation because, when I was going through angel funding to help us fund some of the marketing, we fund most of it ourselves. Like the payrolls on our tab and all that. But you still got to fund marketing. You got to fund growth initiatives. And so when I was talking to some of the angel investors, they said, we get pulled into these, startup meetings all the time. And it's usually like, 4 kids banging out code in the basement. You guys have this whole infrastructure. Like you've got all this stuff. You've invested so much. That's the big difference, is that I think with startups, a lot of startups don't have the right support. It is probably four very bright kids banging out code in the basement, and they have a great idea, and it usually gets stillborn. It doesn't go very far because nobody understands marketing, nobody understands financing, nobody understands sales, nobody knows how to pitch a angel properly. So one of the things I would say that we learned in this whole startup process, and myself being a multiple startup founder, is there's so many pieces of the puzzle to make a business successful. You can't just have a great idea. You can't just have great technology. You need to understand the whole business prospect of what you're doing.
Talk about, Howard, how you incubate within the Turn Lab. And we've seen but there's several really high success stories that, MailChimp comes to mind, of an agency, and then something gets incubated inside of that agency and turns into $1 billion company. Now, obviously that's a unicorn situation, but how do you incubate companies within the Turn Lab?
Well, I think for us, the thing is we're always looking for a problem to solve. And sometimes we get approached by companies with a awesome problem to solve, and we will put them through a process and look at how we can support. And sometimes we do it very directly. Sometimes we do it indirectly. I've been invited to sit on, advisory boards for startups. We offer them some of our resources. In the case of Just Boardrooms, it was a problem that we saw that we didn't see anybody else solving. So that's why we jumped in and we got involved. And it is complicated. I mean, you're taking a lot of your resources. My controller, my new CEO, who joined us from a big creative agency, looked askance at our numbers initially because they went, "Wow, you're putting like big six figures a year into this incubator piece. That could go right to the bottom line." I say, yeah, it could go right to the bottom line, but then that would be boring. I think, one of the things I love about building businesses is how are we leaning in? How are we giving back to society, community, the market in a way that makes us feel like we're actually doing something of value, right? We're not just billing for a fee. A lot of startups don't make it. Just Boardrooms seems to be working really well. Like, we're getting almost 40% compounded growth month over month. So that's amazing. But it might not be successful in the long run because we don't know what headwinds we're going to run into, but we're still making the bet. And I think making the bet's important. I mean, if you think about the growth of economies, it's only growing because we're all kind of making bets, right?
We'll talk about Just Boardrooms in a second, but were there other companies on the table to go after at that time? And how did you choose Just Boardrooms?
Yeah, so we had a interesting startup founder approach us for a marketplace for bicycles, because in the middle of the pandemic, no one could get a bicycle. There were so many supply chain shortages. He had a great idea around bringing together all kinds of sellers into one marketplace. So you could be Jeremy with a bicycle and put it on the platform and sell it, just like an Airbnb listing. You could also be a bike shop, kind of like a list of bicycle. You could also be a manufacturer, list of bicycle. It's a really great idea. I think they're called WeCycle. They're still out there. We ended up not going down the road because all of a sudden the market, in the middle of the conversations, the market changed a lot. All of a sudden there was a glut in bicycles the year after because the lockdown ended and people could actually go back to doing other things other than riding a bicycle around. So I'm an avid cyclist myself, but I understood very quickly that this marketplace dynamic was just too volatile for us to spend potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of our own money incubating this. So that's just one example. We get approached by startup founders all the time. We do vet them carefully. And sometimes the best thing we can do is give them a good reason why we're not doing it, which would maybe help them rethink their business as well. So again, we don't do it lightly. We do spend time with these founders, and we also learn a lot in the process. So we get something back from these conversations as well.
Are they coming to you, Howard, in maybe hiring you for research, or are they coming to you, go, we'd like to partner and have you take, equity stake and help run this?
Both situations happen. So we get approached to help build technology. We got approached by a company called WeBookCare. Great idea. They're based out of Vancouver, and they're trying to launch, again, a global platform for getting health resources help, like a Uber type model, where if you're a healthcare professional, like a nurse, for example, you can list on the platform as a provider and a user. Let's say, Jeremy, let's say you have elderly parents that need care. You can put them together on the platform. So it's great. So they were struggling with their technology. So they came to us and actually helped asked us for help for research and also to help manage their whole technology ecosystem. So we came in as a consultant. We actually did some programming for them as well, but they also had programmers they were using. So that's an example of how we came in and kind of did a fee for service type of approach. But there are others that we have taken equity stakes in. So it's, we're a little bit private equity, we're a little bit VC, and a little bit service provider at the same time.
Is it a combination sometimes where, so it's like, hey, here's a proposal, but, we'll knock X amount off for equity?
Yes, those are definitely conversations we've had, and we've done a couple of deals like that in the past. I would say we're always careful around those kinds of deals because a lot of startup founders, they're just really, really anxious to get help, and we want to make sure we're giving them the right kind of help. Just taking an equity stake, unless we're willing to lean in and actually be involved as advisors, whatnot, it's not that much value to them. So I've learned in business that success isn't actually about what you get, it's about what you give, right? So we have to really understand, what are we willing to give to help others? Because that's usually our path to success.
Totally. So let's talk about Just Boardrooms.
All right.
How'd that happen? And I'll pull it up here. So if you're listening to the audio, we will show, there's a video version of this as well. But how did that come about?
So in the middle of the pandemic, we saw this massive collaboration deficit happening in our industry to start, like the marketing industry. This is an industry where collaboration is literally the key to our outcomes, right? If we're not having collisions and we're not having arguments, we're not having debates, it's very challenging to create better outcomes. I saw a report published by Microsoft in the middle of the pandemic. They studied thousands and thousands of workers globally, half of which work predominantly in the office and half of which work predominantly remote. And what they were actually trying to do was measure productivity. And they actually noticed there wasn't a massive amount of productivity difference. What they noticed was a big difference in quality of outcomes and a big difference in quality of innovation. So they found that the in-office people were more innovative. They produced better product. Harvard Business Review published a study that showed that you're 10 times more likely to close a deal in person than over a video conference call. So this collaboration deficit was really impacting businesses. So we really wanted to create an easy, frictionless way for people to create moments that matter, meet for those moments that matter. Our tagline is more handshakes in more places. And the whole idea here is we want to make it easy. Let's say for you, Jeremy, if you don't have an office, or even if you have an office downtown, maybe you might want to meet closer to where your client lives, or maybe you might want to meet closer to where your team lives. So this frictionless on-demand piece.
Like, I know you have places in the city, actually. So like I'm in the suburbs. So if I want to meet someone in the city, I can go here. I know exactly where this is, North Ravenswood. It's like a super nice, like industrial area that's got like lofts and brick, and you can see that. And for $20 an hour, I can, have a professional space and probably have internet, which, meet instead of meeting at a public coffee shop or something.
Yeah, public coffee shops are hard now, right? You don't really want Brad, the barista, dropping in on your conversation around the technology project that you're working on. So I do think that this piece, we started in Toronto, so obviously we're growing. We've only have a couple of places in Chicago right now, but we expect hundreds in Chicago over time. We already have over 100 in Toronto. We're now in 50 markets in the U.S. and Canada. We're in Austin, Seattle, Vancouver, Montreal. So it's growing quickly. What I love about this whole concept, it's the whole idea of exponential growth through a platform. There's companies and there are platforms. Platforms are like the Ubers and the Airbnbs. The wonderful thing about platforms is it doesn't cost us any money to onboard a new host. These hosts in Chicago, they list for free, and we take a 15% take, just like an Airbnb, if we rent. And that 15%, we just pile into marketing. We just pile into the paid search, retargeting. So these hosts, they basically treat us like a marketing channel. We bring new prospects for them, and we make incremental income off of inventory that they have. So we have no leases, we have no overhead. Our overhead is basically sales and marketing, and of course the technology. So it's an interesting model for us. And when we launched it in March of 2023, I think we had like 3 bookings, and we were like, oh, maybe we have a business. Someone actually booked on our platform, and now it's grown to the point where we definitely see incredible runway for this. We're in North America now. We'll be launching in the EU soon as well, with hosts there. So we really want to be the Airbnb of professional meeting spaces, and lots of stub toes, hits and misses along the way. There was moments when we're like, how is it possible that no one's booking this week? And now it's like, how is it possible that someone's not booking this hour? So it's changed a lot in the last few months.
This is funny. I'm on the Just Boardrooms booking about page, and some really funny videos here. But this seems like a beast to do.
Yes.
You talk about some stub toes. I love your term. That's the term, stub toes, related to this. What are some things that you learned along the way that you had to, iterate on?
Well, I think everybody thought we were trying to be WeWork, right? So like, no, we're not trying to be WeWork. WeWork can be a host on our platform. We're a platform, we're a marketplace. We're not physical infrastructure. We've had angel investors going, well, what's the difference between this and WeWork and Regus? And we were very often compared to like physical spaces. So we really struggled to get our story straight and articulate it properly. And that's gotten a lot better now. So I think, when I say things like, we're the Airbnb of, that helps. We're at Collision presenting last year in Toronto, the Collision conference. And we had actually a Booking.com executive come up to me and say, I'm a little insulted. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, you say you're the Airbnb of meeting spaces. Why aren't you the Booking.com of meeting spaces? Why aren't you using our brand? He goes, well, with all due respect, Airbnb is better known, even though Booking.com is actually a much bigger company. But the other thing is Booking.com is all about professional hosts. You guys are all about hotels. What we're about is not just professional hosts, but non-professional hosts. So on our platform, we have law firms, we have ad agencies, we have consultancies. It's not just co-working spaces and hotels. And he goes, that's a really good point. He says, I like your model. So one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to get better at bringing non-professional hosts on board. I mean, if you're a law firm and your boardroom's empty 70% of the time, why wouldn't you want to monetize it for $80 an hour, $90 an hour? And then there's an old saying, everybody needs a lawyer. So, one of the great stories that we had is we had an ad agency on our platform in Toronto who landed a client through one of our guests. So guest came in after the meeting. He was chatting with the receptionist and said, like, what do you guys do here? And they go, oh, we're an ad agency. He goes, oh, we're actually doing an RFP right now for a rebrand. Would you guys like to throw your hat in the ring? They did, and they won the business. So
great for networking.
Hoping, yeah, it's great for networking. So I think, whenever you build a platform, there's all kinds of surprises that come out of it that you don't really know, because all you're doing is bringing people together. That's essentially what we're doing. We're bringing people together, and how they connect and collaborate is of their own creation. So that's the kind of power of this whole idea.
Yeah, I'll definitely. I mean, this is great. Howard, I'm going to share this with a few people. Obviously, I know a lot of agencies, and also they all have like a video room or something. It's underutilized. And they want people to use, but I travel. I'll go to Scottsdale once or twice a year, so I'm looking here at. I usually have to kind of go through this whole, like you're saying, like this Regus thing. Well, I don't really want a whole monthly membership. I just want a room for a day. And this would be super easy and super affordable, even maybe just for 4 hours, right? And they're like, no, we can't do that. You need to get a whole day or a week or a month. And so like this one here, this is great. I get it for like, 5-6 hours for like $60.
I know, it's amazing. And also, if you have someone that you're meeting out there, it's much better and more controlled environment where you can meet them in a professional space like this versus a coffee shop, right? And sometimes a business lunch gets awkward, right? So with it in a setting like this, you get down to business in the most productive way, and that's what a lot of feedback we're getting from our users is that they just find by using our spaces they're just more productive.
Totally. First of all, Howard, I just want to thank you for sharing your journey, your lessons, your story. I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to point people to check out to learn more. You can check out theturnlab.com or justboardrooms.com. So if you're listening, you have some extra space or you need a space, check out Just Boardrooms. And my last question, Howard, is, I mentioned the front of the interview, just everything vanishes in our lives, and the number one focus becomes if there's a health issue, right? And so talk about when you got the cancer diagnosis and how that changed things for you.
Well, I will say that whenever you're faced with an existential crisis in life, it catalyzes stuff, right? So in my case, it catalyzed a lot of stuff personally around my health, but it also catalyzed stuff around my business. Like I've been thinking about this different model for years. And when I got the cancer diagnosis, that's what made me actually make the decision to shut down my old company and start this new thing. I said, well, how much time do I have left? If I was in my 50s at the time, and I was like, if I wait, maybe I run out of time, so let's just do it. So it catalyzed some decision making, which I think was really important. And as I navigated my own health crises, I got really good at falling in love with cancer, the problem of cancer. So I did a ton of research. I talked to some amazing researchers and scientists and doctors. I really leaned in and I fell in love with the problem, which actually really inspired me around the idea of falling in love with a problem in business as well. And so I think there's a real connection between my own health crisis and some of the decisions I made around family, business, how I want to live the remaining years of my life. I think that was all catalyzed through cancer. So cancer was kind of a gift in a way. Like it kind of, luckily I'm through it. Like I went through some very innovative, successful surgery in Germany. I actually went out of country to get a focal therapy that my tumor was quite large, it was quite advanced. So
and you had prostate cancer.
Prostate cancer, yeah, I had prostate cancer. And if you know anything about the current treatments for prostate cancer, most have massive side effects, continency, erectile dysfunction, all kinds of issues. So I did the research to find a therapy that was actually originated in Albany, New York. And so it's available in the US called IRE NanoKnife. It's a focal therapy that involves putting very fine needles through your perineum into your prostate tumor and then ablating them. So American innovation. And then this clinic in Germany who adopted it had done more than any clinic in the world.
It sounds super painful.
It actually is not painful at all.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about a robotic or manual prostatectomy, they're literally cutting your prostate out with a knife. And there's so much nerve damage that a lot of men end up wearing diapers for the rest of their lives. So this one, you're 100% asleep, you're under, they go into the perineum. You spend one night in the hospital, and within a few weeks, you're back to functioning normally. So in my case, they were successful in getting the entire tumor out. And so it was great. So for 5 years, I was cancer-free, but then my cancer came back 2 years ago. So the one downside of focal therapy of any type is they leave part of your prostate healthy. Well, as I'm getting older, like a lot of men, prostate cancer can occur in the healthy tissue. So it came back again. This time I took a different approach. I actually went to my urologist in Germany and said, look, you've seen the tumors. What do you think? And he said, well, they're not huge, so you probably have some time. So we could do like what they call active surveillance, which is basically nothing, and see where it goes. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. So I met with a naturopathic oncologist who's also, I think, a chiropractor background. And she recommended some specific therapies. So I cut out alcohol out of my diet. I cut out refined sugar. I started eating a predominantly plant-based diet. I started eating anti-inflammatory foods like curcumin and lots of dark leafy greens. I started doing a vitamin C IV once a month. And after 18 months of this therapy, I went back to Germany and all my tumors are gone. Again, falling in love with the problem. So what I did may not have worked for everyone, but it worked for me because I really did the diligence myself. So I think cancer has been transformational for me in terms of learning about myself, but it's also directly or indirectly impacted my business as well.
Howard, that's really valuable. I really appreciate you sharing that. Everyone, check out justboardrooms.com, check out theturnlab.com, and we'll see everyone next time. Howard, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.